Hey guys, welcome to the Somber Hour here at Somber Studios. I'm your host, Jessica Bill, and we are now reaching episode 3 of the Somber Hour. Episode 1 was focused around my personal demonic story, as well as how I developed my love for horror. Episode 2 was focused around McKeamy Manor's lawsuit against Hulu and who they are as a torture house. And now we're reaching episode 3, and in this episode, we're going to be talking about basically scary stuff that has happened on horror movie sets. But some of the stuff is pretty real, some of the stuff is paranormal. Nonetheless, these stories are very interesting and a really big part of cinematic history, especially in the horror world. So get ready. Some of these stories are fun, but some of these stories are pretty dark. And these are all real stories that have happened on film sets while shooting movies. So we're going to go ahead and lead in with the first story, and that is a story of the Twilight Zone. A lot of people don't know that the Twilight Zone has a pretty horrifying behind the scenes tale that ended up with death. And it all began with the director, John Landis. So if you guys don't know who John Landis is, I believe he is the one who directed the music video Black or White by Michael Jackson. He's a relatively taller guy, brunette with a beard, white. I'm sure you've seen a few of his other things. That's just what I personally know him for, is Michael Jackson's music video. But he has done a few motion pictures, and he was set to direct The Twilight Zone until something horrifying happened. So if you guys don't know what the Twilight Zone is, I'm sure if you're watching a horror-related channel, you know what the Twilight Zone is. But the Twilight Zone, to catch you up, was a TV show with really big plot twists, and it was all centered around horror and thriller. It's very popular for the horror story with the ventriloquist puppet. That's a really big one. And there's also some pretty creepy parallels to how they predicted the future to turn out to be like the plastic surgery episode where everyone looks the same. I mean, that kind of sort of happened when we hit the Kylie Jenner era. But the Twilight Zone, nonetheless, is full of really interesting, mysterious stories. So they decided, being that the franchise is so popular and so well loved, I mean, the Twilight Zone is actually a ride at Hollywood Studios over at Disney, the Tower of Terror. So they wanted to make Twilight Zone the movie. So Twilight Zone the movie was supposed to feature 4 segments. In the script for the first segment, Time Out, character Bill Connor, played by Vic Morrow, is transported back in time to the Vietnam War, where he has become a Vietnamese man protecting 2 children from American troops. And filmmaker John Landis, who directed this first segment, violated California's child labor laws by hiring a 7-year-old Micah Din Lee and 6-year-old Renee Shin Shen, I think I said that right, without the required permits needed. Landis and the members of his staff were responsible for a number of labor violations connected with other people involved in the accident, which came to light afterwards. So there was, if you guys don't know, in Hollywood, there are child labor laws to protect children from being overworked. When you're making a movie, we're talking beyond 8 hours of work. Oftentimes, this could look to be 13 hours of work. Some people don't even leave the set for 2 to 3 days. Of course, they get their breaks, they get their foods, and they get a bit of rest. But for the most part, it is a pretty demanding job to be an actor of a major motion picture. And it takes countless hours, countless days, countless weeks, many months, sometimes many years to produce a high budget, high content value production. And so because children cannot keep up with that kind of lifestyle, I mean, they're just not built to handle it. Hardly adults are. It's incredibly demanding and exhausting. There are child labor laws that protect them from being overworked. This is actually why twins are very popular in the acting world, because they can get around child labor law issues by having a lookalike of the child, and they just go ahead and flip-flop, and give the individual child a break, and they get to have more screen time, more working time with essentially what looks to be like the same kid. So these would be actors like Dylan and Cole Sprouse. Dylan and Cole Sprouse definitely covered for each other in a lot of works. So if Cole Sprouse is acting in a film, Dylan sometimes came in and filled in for the hours that Cole Sprouse was not legally allowed to work because he already worked a set of hours. So that is definitely how most of Hollywood works, is they do seek out twins, and even better if they can find triplets. But John Landis didn't particularly find twins. He just picked children, and tried to get away with going around child labor law, and it didn't really end so well. So it says here the children were hired after Peter, Renee's uncle, was approached by a colleague whose wife was a production secretary for the film. Shen thought of his brother's Taiwanese-born daughter Renee, whose parents agreed to let her participate. He then called a Vietnamese colleague, Daniel Lee, who had a young son named Micah. Micah was an outgoing boy who enjoyed posing for pictures, so his parents thought he would be interested. Shen testified that he was never informed that either of the children would be working near explosives or even the helicopter. If I'm not mistaken, there also is child labor laws that do protect them from doing particular stunts or being close to things like fireworks and explosives as well. Lee and Shen were being paid under the table to circumvent state law, which did not permit children to work at night. Landis opted not to seek a special waiver either because he did not think that he would need to get permission for such a late hour, or because he knew that he would not get approval to have young children in a scene with a large number of explosives. So right off the bat, we can see that John Landis is already intentionally just disregarding the safety of the kids for the sake of getting the job done. And unfortunately, a lot of directors tend to lose themselves when they're producing movies, to the point of, if you look at The Shining with Stanley Kubrick, one of my absolute favorite directors is Stanley Kubrick. I just love his vision. I like his art. I like the way he uses colors and blocking. I just really admire the way he sees his pictures and makes it come to life. But I can also agree that he was incredibly toxic to work with in certain circumstances. And in The Shining, he definitely lost himself in the process for the sake of getting the movie done, to the point of mentally abusing Mary Shelley. Mary Shelley, oh my God, what do you mean Mary Shelley? That's the writer of Frankenstein, Shelley Duvall. Ew, what was that? That was a slip up. Anyways, that threw me off. Ooh. So Shelley Duvall, she's the one that plays Wendy in The Shining, and I'm still like internally laughing that I called her Mary Shelley, LOL. And a lot of times Stanley Kubrick would be aggressive, say really mean things to her, scare her intentionally, threaten her life. I mean, he was mentally abusing her, but he said that he was doing it for the sake of getting a better reaction out of Wendy. So he kept her in this constant state of anxiety and seeking of approval in order to make sure that she performs the way he wants her to. So it was incredibly, incredibly toxic. And a lot of directors are guilty of this. And that is no exception. There's no exception to John Landis as well. So he's just focused on getting the work done rather than getting the work done while everyone is still happy to do the work. It says casting agents were unaware that the children would be involved in the scene. Associate producer George Folsey Jr. told the children's parents not to tell any firefighters on the set that the children were part of the scene, and hid them from a fire safety officer who also worked as a welfare worker. A fire safety officer was concerned that the blast would cause a crash, but he did not tell Landis of his concerns. The filming location was in Indiana Dunes, a movie ranch in the Valencia neighborhood of what is now called Santa Clarita, California. And that was used throughout the 1980s in multiple pictures. The Color Purple is one of them, Escape from New York, China Beach, and the location was within the 30-mile zone. So it's wide open and is an area that is permitted for pyrotechnics. So this was a place that a lot of times when they're shooting explosives, war scenes, this would be the set that they would use. And it was also possible to shoot night scenes without city lights visible in the background. So it was a pretty popular, essentially, set to be in. So the scene in which all of the horror came in was for the night scene. And it called for Moreau's character to carry the two children out to a deserted village and cross a shallow river while being pursued by American soldiers in a hovering helicopter. There's a lot going on there. The helicopter was piloted by Vietnam War veteran Dorsey Wingo, which I actually didn't even know that. Interesting that an actual veteran was behind the helicopter there. During the filming, Wendigo, what is with my speaking today? Wingo. Wingo stationed his helicopter 25 feet from the ground while hovering near a large mortar effect. He then turned the aircraft 180 degrees to the left for the next camera shot. The effect was detonated while the helicopter's tail rotor was still above it, the metal lid on top of the mortar striking the tail rotor, causing the rotor to fail and detach from the tail. The low-flying helicopter spun out of control, and at the same time, Moreau dropped Chen, the child, in the water. This is like a domino effect of horror. He was reaching out to grab her when the helicopter fell on top of Moreau and the two children. Moreau and Lee were decapitated by the helicopter's main rotor blades, while Shen was crushed to death by the helicopter's right landing skid, all three actors dying instantly. So 2 kids and the main lead all passed away in that moment. At the trial, the defense claimed that the explosions were detonated at the wrong time. Randall Robinson, an assistant cameraman on board the helicopter, testified that production manager Dan Allingham told Wingo, "That's too much, let's get out of here," when the explosions were detonated, but Landis shouted over the radio, "Get lower, get lower, get lower." So John Landis was overriding safety protocols, having a helicopter fly way too closely to the explosives, after already overriding multiple protocols for general safety for the children. Robinson said that Wingo tried to leave the area, but that we lost our control and regained it, and then I could feel something let go and we began spinning around in circles. Stefan Leidecker, another camera operator on board, testified that Landis had earlier shrugged off warnings about the stunt with the comment, "We may lose the helicopter." Leidecker acknowledged that Landis might have been joking when he made the remark, but added, "I learned not to take anything the man said as a joke. It was his attitude. He didn't have time for suggestions from anybody." Insane. And you know what's crazier is that they tried so hard to hide the fact that this happened in order to keep John Landis's career intact. And I guess it did a pretty good job because a lot of people don't know anything about this. And this is a huge breaking story. I think it would have been harder to cover up if it was, Steven Spielberg. He's more of a memorable household name because he's just done more higher earning pictures than John Landis has, but John Landis is a pretty well accredited director too. It is surprising, how this was kind of swept under the rug. But I guess it was easier because he's not, essentially a Steven Spielberg. He's up there, but he's not up there enough to the point where they could just straight up hide this horrific history. 8 years later, working with Michael Jackson in a music video as if nothing ever happened. I'm very shocked that he wasn't banned or blacklisted um, because of this, because he violated like a law. He killed people, and he just went right back to work like it was no big deal. And I can't even imagine how many people that he worked with probably didn't really know about this. I think that maybe at the time it was easier to hide it then. And then, of course, when the internet was birthed, that's when the truth starts coming out. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like back then, as long as you didn't talk about it and as long as it was just remaining in the local paper, maybe just people didn't know and they just kept working with him. Versus like now, it'll make its way to the internet. It'll go around town, and there's just, it's harder to hide something you've done now. But being that there's no internet and everything is based off of local news, I could imagine that almost anybody didn't really know about this story, other than maybe those people within that town or within that studio. Very small amount of people, and to everyone else, it's fallen on deaf ears. Um, what a wild time. So that's the first horror story we've got. This one was a heavy one. I started off with probably the hardest one on this list. But let's talk about some more, uh, not lighthearted, but not as dark. Well, then again, this is a horror podcast channel. I guess dark is fine. But let's talk about some supernatural stories that happen on set, because those are always fun to hear about. And it's a common, reoccurring phenomenon that when horror movies are being created, because they're partaking in a lot of things like Ouija boards and whatnot, there's allegedly a lot of supernatural things that happen on the set. So let's start with the second story of this podcast episode. So this one is about The Nun. So it says here that the director, Corin Hardy, claimed that he had his first supernatural experience while shooting the movie. The crew was shooting a scene in a 200-foot-long dark corridor filled with crosses in an actual underground Romanian fortress. That sounds like a recipe for disaster, first of all. A real one? Ooh, ballsy. He ducked into a pitch black cell to watch from the monitors and saw a room full of what he assumed to be local crew members sitting behind him, watching along as well. After the scene played out, he turned back to see the reaction, and no one was there. Corin claims that there was only one door to the room, and it was right in front of him. What the heck? See, I feel like that's worse than just seeing one entity. Seeing a room full of entities, you got me effed all the way up. I cannot even fathom. I would jump out of my skin. I would pass away right then and there. I feel like seeing one is enough. I've seen one. Check episode 1 if you want to know the story behind that. And it's brutal. It's terrifying, because it's just you against that thing that you don't know or understand what powers it has over you, or how malicious it can be, or who it even is. Like the mystery portion of it is absolutely terrifying. A crowd of them, oh my god, I'd pass away. So that's interesting. And we're gonna keep moving a little bit faster pace, because a lot of these are more like, they're more like short-lived explanations. Like I feel like the first story that we just talked about with John Landis was a full-on case, so we did speak a little longer on that. But a lot of these are just like instances. So we're gonna keep going down the list of supernatural experiences here from sets. The next one is the star of The Exorcism of Emily Rose. That one's also a great one. I really did enjoy that film. It says both Jennifer Carpenter and her co-star Laura Linney had paranormal experiences while working on the film. Jennifer revealed that she was woken up several times in the middle of the night by her radio turning on by itself, once blaring Alive by Pearl Jam. She said Laura had a similar experience, except for her it was the TV. Oh my gosh, I don't know if you guys were tuning into my Instagram on that exact day. It wasn't that long ago, literally like a week. I was in my bed, like my room is right here. I was in my bed and I started hearing talking. And I was like, what the heck? I opened my door really slowly because I was nervous. I was like, I don't know if this is a person in here or if it was a video. It ended up being a video. but my computer turned on in the opposite room across. I live alone, by the way, so terrifying. The computer is turned on after it being powered off. I didn't even use it that day, actually. And it started playing a YouTube video. Just a random YouTube video, but blaring it like super loud. And I never have like my volume setting that high, so that was also really bizarre. And I just remember walking slowly and turning my computer off again. I go to my room and it turns back on. Not the video, but the computer itself. Because my friend Liz she texted me. I told her about it, and she's just like, "Oh, maybe somebody's hacking your computer, so you should go check that out real quick on your malware thing." And I was like, "Okay, that's actually a good point." So I walked back. The computer was turned back on, but I ran the malware scans, and it says my computer's completely protected and that there is no hacker. So what the heck? Why would it turn on twice? You know? And it's not like any of my animals did it, because I have a separate sunroom where my animals are at usually. They're never really in my office or in other parts of the house. So explain that one. Don't know. But it was really bizarre, and it reminded me of that story. Moving on to the next paranormal experience. The usual activity on the set of The Possession. Who's seen The Possession? Oh, I don't think I really remember The Possession all too well. It sounds familiar, but I don't know if I remember it right now. I have to refresh my memory. Was it good? Comment down below. It said it didn't happen behind the scenes. It happened while the cameras were running and major scenes were being shot. According to star Jeffrey Dean Morgan, activity ranged from things like exploding lights and inexplicable cold wind in a room that had no drafts, to a mysterious fire that destroyed all the film's props and storage, including the fake dybook they used while filming. To this day, none of them know what caused the fire, as there were no signs of electrical issues or arson. I don't even know what to make of that. I don't know what to make of that story. It's interesting that, so here's the thing. People say, oh, ghosts are not real, yada, yada, yada. It's all like fantasy. But like ghosts have been documented ever since humans have been alive. Like it goes so far back, and we have all of these common grounds, and the cold draft is one of them. Even in my story, I felt like it wasn't necessarily cold, but it was like a chill of wind, like a gust of colder air. I know in some movies they portray it like it's icy cold, like a good 65 degrees. It wasn't that cold for me. It was like somebody running past me in that after wind that you catch. Ooh, sorry, my dogs. But it's still a common thing that people keep accounting for since the beginning of time. Explain that to me. If ghosts are not real, why are we having all of these like common experiences? Moving on to the next story. According to the Ring 2's director, Hideo Nakata, the film's crew had some real-life unfortunate encounters that suspiciously mirrored things that happened in the movie. Oh, okay, that would freak me out. Hideo explained that, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, by the way, that in the film, water is used to symbolize someone's evil spirit. So it was especially creepy for him and the rest of the crew when their production office started flooding days after they started filming the movie. It was so bad that water was literally pouring out of the walls. Additionally, the set costumer had an accident walking to set on the Universal lot where a 6-foot deer sprinted around the corner and right at her, going at about 100 miles an hour. If she had just been a few steps closer, she said it easily would have taken her down. In the film, there's a scene where Samara uses deer in an attempt to kill Rachel and Aiden. That one I kind of want to cross as just an odd coincidence, but that is really strange. The deer thing is a little strange. Maybe a freak coincidence. The water thing, I can see it being a technical thing. They were using water, right, for the set. So, I don't know. That one doesn't seem as, definite in my opinion. What do you think? All right, so the next supernatural experience on a film set is in the Poltergeist trilogy. I've heard of this one before. This came out in the 1980s and was cursed, attributing the long string of unfortunate circumstances that followed the cast and the crew to the use of real human skeletons in the first film. Okay, that should have been your first warning. What made you think, yes, it's a horror movie? I think what we should do is not only have all of these symbols that have to do with, like, I don't know, demons, and then let's just sprinkle in some real human bones because I don't think we'd get haunted I don't know. Like, again, if ghosts are real, I imagine they'd be relatively attached to parts of themselves, like, I don't know, their skeleton in some way, shape, or form, especially if you have, demonic symbols lying around that would maybe open the relationship between the afterlife and our reality. That seems a little bit more like common sense, but it was the 80s, a wild time, as you can tell. Go ask John Landis. So neither the crew nor Jo Beth Williams, who was literally inside the pool with them, knew the skeletons were real and not, in fact, just props. Before the final film was released, 4 cast members died, including the young girl who played Carol Ann herself, Heather O'Rourke. That's an interesting last name. A 5th was brutally murdered over a decade later, and 1 more narrowly escaped their own death. That reminds me, I'm going to add to this list here. This is an interesting story that reminds me of Heather's. Do you guys know that 2 of the actors in Heather's passed away the exact same way in which their lines were said in the film? So one of the ones who played Heather said, what do you have, like a brain tumor or something, or brain cancer or something? And that's what she passed away from after filming the movie. And then one of the male actors said in the movie, "Oh, please God, don't let me die from suicide. I don't think I can handle that," or something like that. And then years later, he passed away from suicide. It's interesting. That is a phenomenon I've heard in multiple movie sets where there's something that they say or do and it aligns with the way they pass away. Oh my God. Let me add to the story. I'm sorry. I have a lot of weird fun facts, probably more interesting than the ones on this list. This one is the one that's the creepiest to me. Let's talk about it. I hope that the FBI isn't listening to me with this story. Okay. I think the most horrifying one next to John Landis would have to be Stanley Kubrick's death. Let me explain why. Because he did pass away from essentially a heart attack, heart failure. But here's why I find that horrifying. Because he passed away only 6 days after the premiere. He had more of a smaller premiere at that time of the film Eyes Wide Shut. If you guys don't know what that movie is, I recommend watching it. Eyes Wide Shut features Tom Cruise, and it is a movie that basically calls out the Illuminati without calling out the Illuminati. It doesn't necessarily tie it to Hollywood or any of those type of things, but it does say a little too much. If the Illuminati is real, it says a little too much. In fact, even in the movie, one of the female characters, pass away in the film due to being murdered for trying to out this little cult. And then on the newspaper, it just reflected that she died from, I think it was heart failure as well, or it was like some sort of natural cause. It's been a while since I've watched it, so I don't remember what it was, but I knew it was a natural cause. And that's what they said in the newspaper. And Tom Cruise's character finds out that she was murdered, and that was just a BS explanation. And that's how the Illuminati gets away with murdering people who threaten the Illuminati's security and anonymity. It's because she was invited into it. She was in it, and then she tried to out them, and then she was made to go away. And so Stanley Kubrick made a movie around this. Ballsy, might I add. Because if it's legit, I mean, you're calling out your own industry. Interesting. So he made the movie, And then 6 days later, and if you guys know, number 6 is Satan's number, he passed away from an alleged natural cause. Just like the character in the movie passed away from an alleged natural cause. But personally, like, you know what I mean? Do you see what I'm trying to put together here? Did he actually pass away from a natural cause? It's kind of sus that he did just after that movie being finished. I don't know, something bizarre about that. It unsettles me. He was older. I believe he was in his 70s when he passed away, so it aligns. It could be another odd coincidence. But I don't know. What do you guys think? That one, that's the one that's always on. That's my Roman Empire. I'm always constantly thinking about that. So you know what's interesting though? I kind of want to lean more on it being just a very odd coincidence. Again, one of those phenomenons. Because Tom Cruise is fine, and Tom Cruise is still working in Hollywood, and he agreed to do the movie. So, you know, to play devil's advocate there, that could be the counter argument. But I don't know. What do you think? I actually want to know if you believe it was a freak accident or if you believe it was parallel to the movie. Sound off below. Now let's wrap it up with one more story, and that is Annabelle. I liked Annabelle. I liked the first one. Beyond that, it kind of got a little bit redundant, but it was a good concept for its time. Both Annabelle and its sequel, Annabelle Comes Home, had some really strange things happen, from onset injuries like light fixtures falling and nosebleeds that stopped after leaving the house, to the Annabelle doll moving on its own. Ultimately, they chose to bless the film set. During the first film, director John R. Leonetti said the first time the demon was in full makeup, he walked down a hallway where suddenly a giant glass light fixture, which an actor had been following, suddenly crashed down onto the actor's head. In the scene they were about to film, the demon killed that character in that exact hallway. On set of the sequel of Annabelle Coming Home, Madison Isman claimed that whenever she'd run up the stairs past the Warrens' bedroom, the Annabelle doll would be in a different position in the room, despite nobody going in the room. McKenna Grace also said that one of the first days on set, rehearsing in the house the crew had crafted, her nose suddenly started pouring blood. When she went outside to clean it, it suddenly stopped. She also claimed that one of the trailers had a strange power outage issue in which the lights wouldn't turn on or off despite crew resetting it and there being no issues they could detect. But, I mean, Annabelle, the doll isn't like a real haunted doll, so that one's kind of... See, here's the thing. When I make a horror movie, you know, it would be kind of tempting to say, like, yeah, my movie set was super haunted and, like, all of these things happened for the sake of, like, making the movie seem much more intense. I feel like it's a marketing ploy sometimes. Maybe some of these stories are legitimate, but I feel like some of them are just like, hey, this would make our movie sound more interesting. Maybe they'll think it's a lot darker because it was so dark filming it that all of these supernatural things have happened, and it kind of entices you to watch the film. So it's kind of hard to differentiate, you know, what's a true story, what's a coincidence, and what's a marketing tactic. Considering that, like, Annabelle isn't like a haunted figure, like it was crafted for the film, the doll itself, I don't know. The original Annabelle was a Raggedy Ann doll. They don't even look alike, so my witchy senses are saying that's a marketing ploy. But what do I know? Or a coincidence. But I don't know. I could see the poltergeist because of like how it was filmed and all that stuff and what they use and the real skeletons, all that kind of stuff. That I understand. I don't know about Annabelle. Comment down below, let me know what you think. Anyway, those are some stories of haunted movie sets. It's almost more interesting than the movie itself. And there are apparently many more stories similar to that. But which story did you particularly find more interesting or more horrifying? Actually, that's a better question. Which story was the most horrifying? I definitely want to give that award to John Landis there. That story really haunts me now. Um, but Stanley Kubrick's story is a really close second, for sure, for sure. But it's actually really interesting how something as filming a movie that is relatively fantasy can trigger the demonic realm, can actually bring forth the afterlife to our reality like that. And it makes me wonder what kind of precautions are they taking or not taking for that to happen. I feel like I feel like maybe the Ouija board is a common one there. They do a lot of Ouija board shots in horror movies, and I feel like maybe just maybe that has to do with it, or the real skeletons, of course. But I feel like most horror movie sets, they kind of make up stuff like the demonic chants from like the poltergeist or something like that. That's all just made up, words said backwards and all that kind of jazz. I personally would never use real demonic chants personally for a horror movie. I just feel like you're asking for it at that point. But it's quite interesting that like they have these shared experiences, and yeah, it makes me wonder. It makes me wonder, it truly does, how that comes about for just shooting a movie. Anyway, stay tuned for episode 4 here on the Somber Hour. We're going to continue talking about scary stuff. The Somber Hour is going to have a lot of material that has to do with horror movies, horror stories, lore, news that have to do with horror. This is just really honestly a fun little communal space for us to hang out, have a conversation, chat about interesting topics that have to do with the genre we all love. And I'm going to definitely make sure to also be uploading my 8D audio horror stories. I'm working on a little bit more of a complicated one right now, and that is the cult themed horror story. If you guys don't know about the 8D audios, essentially it is where you are the main character of the horror story. You have to close your eyes, put in headphones, and understand the story based off of your surroundings. And you could hear it from multiple directions. It's a lot of fun. I'm definitely also going to be trying to upgrade my equipment so that way the 8D audio effects are more real than ever. I feel like I started off with a strong foot, but I feel like there's a lot of improvement left to be made, and you guys really do enjoy that series, so I want to give it my all and upgrade equipment and really try to make it seem like it's as real and close to life as possible. So I'm working on a cult themed one now, which is going to be a lot of fun. And if you guys are interested in history, I do have another podcast called The Found Records. I only have one episode on there right now. I should have episode 2 up very soon, but that one's more just about debunking modern day history myths. So if that's something parallel to what you enjoy, check out my channel, Jessicaville, as that's where I upload the video formats of those, or check it out on Spotify called The Found Records. But I've got content going on everywhere. I've got Instagram, I got TikTok, I got Twitter that I never use, but it's there, Facebook. So check me out on other platforms. I make so much different. I'm kind of a mixed bag. I started off very niche, and I've kind of expanded to kind of touch base on all my personal interests. So makeup is definitely a topic. I do makeup history, as well as cosplays, as well as vintage stuff. I'm all over the place. But if you guys want to stick to a specific niche, my YouTube channels are the way to go, because I only upload horror on Somber Studios, and I only upload vintage stuff on my other YouTube channel. So those are a little bit more organized. But thank you guys so much for tuning in to the Somber Hour here at Somber Studios. Feel free to let me know what kind of things you want me to talk about, or what topics you are more interested in, so I can curate the episodes more towards what you are looking forward to. I am like one of those brains that just kind of know a little too much about random stuff. And horror is one of those genres where I have a lot of random fun facts. So, feel free to pick my brain and let me know what would be interesting to you. But in the meantime, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Be sure you check out the other episodes that I think are personally very interesting as well. And I'll see you guys in your nightmares.